All right, this is Jack Donovan, and you are listening to or watching Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture. And I'm here with my co-host, as always, CB Robertson. And today we're going to talk about initiation. I get questions on this. People ask me about initiation. It's just a topic that comes up in. I got made fun of for saying this last night by a buddy of mine who popped into town teaching a gun workshop. He's like one of the long range coaches for Loophole, and I've worked with him before, and he's kind of an old friend. I've actually worked something. He said it into a couple articles, so we had dinner last night, and he's what is this? What everybody says it's a space. What is a space now? Why it's a marketing word? Why you have to say everything? Because like the men's space is where he's like, I'm in the gun space and this is the men's space. But yeah, in the men's space, he's like, now that he brought it up, I'm going to be super conscious that I use it all the time. But in the men's space, the topic of initiation comes up a lot. And there's a reason why. And it's been kind of since the beginning of the modern men's movement, like the beginning of the mythopoetic men's movement in 1990. When King, Warrior, Magician, Lover came out, and obviously Iron John by Robert Bly came around, at a similar time, and all these guys were working together, and then they got made fun of a lot in the media because they were doing, kind of professors and nerds doing drum circles and shit. But but of course feminists make fun of them because that's what they do, is they try to emasculate men to like maintain power, and that's kind of their whole deal. God forbid these guys actually experiment and figure it out and see what works and what doesn't, right? So, but right at the beginning of this book, the first chapter is called the Crisis in Masculine Ritual Process. And the first paragraph, I think, really is where all this, we need initiations. Why don't we have initiations? Modern men don't. I don't think men thought about initiations until this book came out. I don't think they thought, what I'm missing is an initiation. They knew they were missing something probably, but not that. But this put that into the conversation, I'm pretty sure. And it says, here's the quote. "We hear it said of some men that he just can't get himself together. What this means on a deep level is that so-and-so is not experiencing and cannot experience his deep cohesive structures. He is fragmented. Various parts of his personality are split off from each other and leading fairly independent and often chaotic lives. A man who cannot get it together is a man who has probably not had the opportunity to undergo ritual initiation into the deep structures of manhood. He remains a boy, not because he wants to, but because no one has shown him the way to transform his boy energies into man energies. No one has led him into direct and healing experiences of the inner world of masculine potentials." Now, a lot of that doesn't mean anything. They go, what are the potential masculine potentials? And it already reads like a marketing paragraph for a retreat. It's like the event. It's almost like here's the events handout that you get. But the idea here, which I don't agree with, is that a man who can't get it together has probably not had the opportunity to undergo ritual initiation into the deep structures of manhood. I don't know that that's anyone has ever called it the deep structures of manhood, and before this. And the idea that ritual has always happened, like a masculine rite of passage. The idea that that's always happened is a little bit spacious or whatever. I don't know that that's always happened, but obviously there is a record of it happening in many, many cultures. And there's tons of anthropological material that's really, really interesting. And it's all over the place. I have another great book sitting around here somewhere that I was going through the other day. It's called by Mircea Eliade, the guy who wrote The Sacred and the Profane. He wrote a whole book on symbols and rites of initiations. And I was going through that, and there's all kinds of descriptions of rites and initiations that people have gone through, from Africa to India to Germanic cultures to ancient Rome, all this stuff. And there's also, some famous anthropological material like Victor Turner's books, Arthur Van Gennep. All these guys have spent a lot of time talking about the initiatory process or the rite of passage process. But I don't know if that's really the problem that we have in modern society, is that men don't have initiations. I think the bigger problem, and this is what the question I always ask, like, what are you getting initiated into? Because there's all these people like, I need an initiation. And people are selling initiations. Well, what are you initiating them into? Yeah. I mean, are they going to have responsibilities? Because that's when a young boy got initiated as a rite of passage into manhood in a tribal society, then there were all kinds of expectations about who he had to be then. One of the parts of the process is that you basically become nothing in the middle. In the ritual process, they make you into nothing, or just the spirits, or you lose your identity, and then they give you a new one, which is manhood. But the problem with it, like manhood in a culture like that, has a very specific definition, and this is what's expected of men. This is what's not expected of men. These are the rules. These are the benefits. All the things that come with being a manhood are all actually pretty well established. And the problem that we have in, obviously, modern culture is that the rules of manhood are completely up in the air. So they're not, no one is really agreeing on what a correct man should do. So how would you initiate someone into manhood? Into like general manhood in Western society? That's almost impossible. What you can do, and what I think is valid, is that you can initiate guys into organizations, into like career roles. Obviously, the military has its own initiation processes. We were talking. One of our guys was talking about one that he declined. The crossing the equator.
Yes.
On a boat. He was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing whatever mess that is." Like because a lot of modern like initiations are just are humiliation rituals, and they're just like the upper guys making fun of the lower guys, and like, we want to see what you'll do to like get our approval. And I experienced that a little bit. I mean, we can talk about things that we've gone through and whatever initiate a little bit, but just the idea that men need initiations. I think initiations are really good. They are really positive, but I also think these people who sell them as an initiation, like, I don't think that that's exactly, if it's a weekend retreat, like, what have you really been initiated into? Right. If you're in a society of a group, then that it has expectations about what that group is and what its beliefs are and whatever. Okay. And some of these groups do that. Like, you have to get initiated into our group, and then you are still a member of the group, and then we still participate and interact with each other and all this stuff. And that's valid. But, just like, come to my weekend for $395 and I will initiate you into manhood is pretty bullshitty, I think. Yeah. And a little bit predatory. I don't want to give, because people say bad things about me all the time, and so I'm sensitive to try not to listen to sketchy claims. But there have been a lot of claims made about some of these organizations that initiate men, like, oh, okay, there's nudity. Okay, cool. Oh, well, that's all right. Because it is technically correct, like anthropologically correct. Nudity is correct, but modern society, there's just a lot of opportunity for predatory behavior there, and like, maybe someone's getting off on that, and so, like, it's just a very thin line to walk, and so I've just I've seen and heard a lot of different things like that.
Who's the guy with the huge forehead and the beard who's always talking about male? And you know the guy I'm talking about?
Oh, the absolute worst. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, that's the like.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't even want to.
he's
Like,
almost
I get
he's almost
mad
a
when people share
caricature.
his links because then I have to see his
Yeah.
face because his face is fucked up.
There are some people where we'll just say you can't tell where there's like a Poe's law dynamic where you can't tell where the most extreme end of the sort of LARPing side of male pseudo feminist in many ways initiation ends and people making fun of that sort of begins, and he's like right on that edge. But
yeah, you can't tell if he's taking himself seriously or like, do you really believe? Because he says ridiculous things like on the far end of the claims that I just made, but like gave a caveat for. Like he's like, men have to get naked and jerk off together and stuff. Just the worst, like things that like are not.
You know what it feels like, and not just those extreme things, but the whole striving for initiation in general.
Yeah.
There's a book called After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre. He's a very famous philosophy professor. And he opens his book by describing a hypothetical world in which science did something terrible as an institution, and all the scientists were purged, and all the scientific institutions were destroyed and wiped out by people, but vengefully set fire to. And after a generation or so, people are like, well, maybe we reacted. Let's bring back science. But the institutional knowledge of the science was lost.
Right.
But a few sort of anthropologists begin discovering old science texts or fragments of science texts. And it becomes fashionable for the higher class, members of society to start talking about hypotheses and theory and falsifiability. But they don't actually know they don't have a functioning understanding of what these words mean in practice. It's more of a fashion statement. And he describes people going through what you might call a kind of cargo cult mode of science, where we just imitate the sort of appearance of science, and that will sort of bring back the science. And I feel like that's what many people have been doing with these ideas of initiation, which come, I think, from Carl Jung to some degree, and maybe were primed, though not explicitly in relation to initiation necessarily, by Joseph Campbell with the Hero of the Thousand Faces. And we're going after this thing that we've convinced ourselves that we need. And maybe we do need it, but the question should be, why do we think we need this? What is it that we are hoping initiation will, what initiation sized hole in our lives do we think will be filled with initiation? Very often, I think what men are looking for is social validation and respect and honor within the group. And so what they're after in initiation is being acknowledged as initiated in a group. And it was funny. I was thinking about what am I going to say about this? And I realized, sitting next to my computer, I've had this journal, which I've been writing in for since 2015. In this case, this is where I sketched out the ideas of In Defense of Hatred in. And I came across this entry. I don't know if this is visible at all, but I realized back in 2015 that there's a difference between vision quests and rites of passage. And a rite of passage is something that is done within the context of a group. Often entire groups of young men will do these things together, like boot camp, for example. And those are where we find social validation, and you become socially validated as having done a certain thing and being qualified at a minimum level within the context of that group. They've all seen you do it. What modern men in our sort of atomized urban social context, where we have this dynamic of the unbelievable labor mobility like we've never seen in all of history. We can just get up and move anywhere. And that means geographically, in social circles, in digital circles. There's no stable social group really anymore, or very few, I should say, within which to find this. So what we're trying to do is replace these rites of passages with vision quests, or what you might call self-initiation. And there's an asterisk where I think there are ways of doing things like that in a slightly more legitimate manner. I think our good friend Johnny Manaz does as good of a job as any in that direction. But for the most part, vision quests are not going to bring these young men the thing that they're really looking for, which is honor and respect within an honor group, a social culture. And what you need for that is patience and going through doing some very boring work for years at a time. This is getting your PhD. This is, in my case, I think my first really meaningful one, getting my black belt. Does this mean I'm a very good fighter? No, I would get my ass kicked by a lot of people, but it does bring you up to a certain minimum threshold of competence with a certain set of skills. And then that's sort of the beginning. I guess my most recent one was getting my journeyman card as an electrician. Is that an initiation? Yes, I am now legally allowed to do things with wire that normal people are not legally allowed to do. Can you still do it? Well, yeah, you can, but you might get in trouble if you try to get paid for it. Whereas I'm permitted to do that. Does that make me like a really, really good electrician? No, I am still learning. I am like fresh in the field. I've been a journeyman for less than a year. I'm only beginning to discover the things I don't know about this trade. Initiation is not an endpoint. It's a passing over a threshold into a beginning of a journey where you're not back at square one, but it's I think a lot of men are treating this as though initiation was the destination, when in fact it is just a point along the journey. And when they cross that threshold and it doesn't fulfill that final but for this I would be happy sensation that they were hoping for, that they can maybe I got the wrong initiation, maybe I need a different initiation, and then it's off to another weekend, trip into the Colorado mountains with a different group of guys or something.
Right. Well, I mean, I like that you kept using the word threshold, because that's the literal translation of the word liminality.
Limin,
I believe, is a threshold, and that I actually learned the word liminality, from Chuck Palahniuk, because when he and I were talking about what I was doing ritually at that time when he interviewed me, he's like, no, that's not real. You're creating a liminal space, like and he's the one who turned me on to Victor Turner. Yeah, obviously he was just kind of judging it from what I was telling him, but I mean, he was right to a certain extent, and it was something that I incorporated into things in my understanding of things as time going on, and that idea, that is what an initiation really is. It is a threshold that you cross over. You're in between when you're going through an initiation. The process that is done over and over in rituals throughout history, all around the world, is that you're kind of a nobody in no man's land, and because you're no longer what you were, and you aren't the thing yet until the initiation is over. Yes. So you're this kind of like nobody, and this is where
it's called being an apprentice.
Apprentice boot camp. Like you're not a Marine yet.
Like, you're also not a civilian.
Yeah, you're not a civilian. You're kind of a piece of shit. And that's what happens. And I think that unfortunately that's been degraded in modern society, that the point where like a lot of things that were initiation that were more formal, or there was something to be proud of. And we talked about this actually in the Greater Mandala today, that a lot of ritual initiations are really just hazing, in which the big guys get to like make you do something that makes you feel silly, or humiliates you, or degrades you in some way, and they're kind of laughing at you because you're doing it. But once you've done it, well, we all had to do it too, therefore you're one of us now. And that's that's an extremely low form of initiation. Like, oh, you've humiliated yourself sufficiently to entertain us,
Well,
is kind of gross.
It's
But
also there are many initiations involve those kinds of humiliation rituals, but it's not just that either. Like there's
right,
no electrical apprentice who makes it through their entire apprenticeship who will come out the other side as a journeyman and not have heard either been asked or heard a story about someone else being asked to go and fetch the wire stretcher, the device that stretches the wire longer. If it's a particularly low
I know that
IQ
one.
apprentice,
I know
they might be
like
yeah.
my dad's an electrician. I know that one.
Right, they might
Yeah,
be told to get some elbow grease if you know. Very very basic. There's certain jokes that will play a prank on you at your expense, but that's almost a part of the knowledge you need in order to be in this trades world. Like
right,
it's not obviously as important as code knowledge. And if all you get as an apprentice are these little humiliation jokes and practical pranks, like that's not the initiation. The majority of the initiation is, making up hundreds of outlets and devices. Maybe you bend a little bit of pipe. You have to learn a bunch of stuff about the code, and things like that. Oh, same thing with boot camp. Um, do all military guys have funny jokes from boot camp? Like maybe they had a guy who didn't laugh at one of their RDCs or their drill instructors' jokes, and so they were beaten because they didn't laugh. When normally you get beaten if you do laugh. That was me.
right.
Mike, there was a guy in our platoon who was it was a medical rehab platoon, MRP, at MCRD in San Diego. So it was kind of a demoralizing place. Well, this one guy, a recruit, decided a good way to pass the time. He's kind of a hairier guy. But he would shave his stomach with a downward pointing arrow on his chest before evening hygiene inspection. So we're all standing there in our underwear watching the freaking drill instructor walk by, and he stops in front of this guy and says in his drill instructor voice, "Oh no, it's worse. The fact that you did this, or the fact that you did this for me. Go shave that off." And no one could hold it together. And there's all kinds of goofy stuff like that, but that's not what boot camp is. Everyone
Right.
has those experiences, but most of boot camp is learning to march, learning to polish your boots, learning to dot your I's and cross your T's if you're in the Navy, or handwriting is super critical. It's learning to fold your clothes the way they tell you to. It's learning to do everything the way they tell you to, and do it quickly and efficiently, and to pass that on to the next guy so that the chain of command doesn't have to keep instructing every subsequent person. Is bringing you into this fold. And some of these humiliation rituals bring you into a broader culture that creates a sort of larger world experience that we all share together. But that's not the functional point of it.
Right.
So I think people can get a little caught up in aspects of initiation without grasping the part they play in the broader whole of the worldview they are trying to impart and create within the initiatee.
Yeah, and just generally, men are going to like poke fun at you. I mean, that's just like what.
Yeah.
Like if you're actually friends, you're actually going to do that. So I mean, that's kind of part of the whole deal. But one of the things that came out of our discussion that we were having in the Greater Mandala about it was like, I think, I just because I've seen this in real life a good bit, because of some of the organizations I was in before. It's one thing to initiate, to haze a young man who's like 18 to 24. Like that's the correct age to be hazed. Like you're kind of retarded, and like it's good for you to respect your elders and
a little bit
what.
of an ego check. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're like 30, you almost kind of have to respect the man less for allowing it. Okay, well now you're a full adult male and you're just allowing yourself to be degraded. That's a little different. Like I just because, I remember, being kind of asked to haze guys who were like 35, 30, like who were like my age or older. And I'm like, I'm not treating this guy like he's an 18-year-old. That's, like, especially, we had several guys who were like, who were veterans. Like they've already been hazed in the military. They don't need to like do, what we used to call at Volgang, fuck games. Basically, like they don't need to be doing ridiculous shit to like look, and so I think, in a positive initiation, ordeals are part of it, and you're supposed to do something that is hard, and that's why I think a lot of these, as you said, like taking pieces of initiations, a lot of these workshops and retreats and stuff for men do like things like ice baths and things like that. Like this is something hard that once you've done it, like, oh, you did it, you made it through, right? That is a little hard thing to do. If you look at what they used to do for young men of the tribe to become adults, I mean, it might have involved adult circumcision, or like being bitten by ants, or like being buried half alive. There's a lot of things that different tribes have done to young men as part of the thing. But these ordeals that they have to go through, these painful ordeals, or like these painful rituals, or the idea of many of these is to demonstrate courage, and not just to be like, I can be humiliated, but like to show courage.
Yeah.
And I think that a good initiation model would be like, is that person going to be proud that they did this?
The thing,
or are they going to be embarrassed that they did this?
I forget which tribe. Was it the Apache? There's one of the subgroups of the Sioux that have this sun wheel.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that a lot in the order, about how they put they attach things to their
bone
chest.
hooks through the skin of their chest, and they hang back from this sun pole for days, basically, until the bar breaks through their skin, and that's when it's over. And is that humiliating? Well, no. That's like terrifyingly badass in a very strange endurance kind of way. It's
right. Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here talking like somebody did this, and we're sitting here like, solid. It's
hardcore.
That's hardcore. And that's what I mean. Like, if you're going to do something that's like an ordeal, and an ordeal is part of initiation, generally speaking. Like, obviously, the one that everyone knows, because everyone who watched 300, the idea of Spartans, and this gets into the whole Mannerbund theme, but the idea of a young boy being sent out into the wilderness to like fend for himself, basically, and then once you come back, I mean, that's a whole ordeal. You have to be cold, and it's basically Naked and Afraid. Basically, like Naked and Afraid, the TV show, but then like it's your initiation, so yeah, I mean, anything like that. One thing that we did do in the group I was in was everybody had to take a boxing match. Some of them take wrestling matches, but most of them were boxing matches. And like, I had never really done that. And like that I put a lot of effort into that, into doing that the first time, and it was scary. Like, how's this going to go? Like, how's this fight going to go in front of with all these guys judging me standing around? Like, I mean, but yeah, I've always been proud that I did that. Like, that was not bad at all. That was that, and so something like that as a requirement for initiation into something is I think. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be as hard for somebody if they've already been like had like 10 boxing fights or whatever. But for a guy who's never done that is a big deal.
You could probably make a pretty useful list of certain activities that would make for good initiation components. Being in a fight is one. It was something you mentioned a few live streams ago. Was killing an animal that you are going to eat, and maybe
Yes.
helping in the preparation process of that. Or are two that come to mind offhand. I've been in two, I won't say fights, because there was never with anyone I wasn't getting along with, but two, we'll say full contact sparring matches.
Right.
And I won one and lost one, and they were both very positive experiences. Very like, even the ones you lose, you're like, no, it wasn't so bad, and you
Yeah.
come through out the other side with a little bit less fear than you had maybe going in, which is maybe what many of these self-styled self-initiation programs are trying to help men for. And that's maybe a useful thing. It just might not be, maybe calling it initiation might be confusing and misleading to some men, which is not to say that there's no value in it.
Yeah. Yeah. To get back to the main point of like, what are they looking for? You gestured at that, and I think, and you're right in everything that you said. What I was going to add to it is identity. Basically, what they're looking for is identity. When men want to join a group and be initiated into it, and do all the work, that's where they're working. They're like, I'm working really hard to become a part of this group, and then I will be a part of this group, and that's that. Then I will have, in the way that you said, okay, I'm a journeyman electrician, whatever. Like when someone joins the Freemasons, they have to memorize all this stuff and go through these rituals and whatever, and then they're okay. Now I'm a master Mason, and now I get invited to all the things. I get to go, I have a role, and that's, I mean, the group that I joined, I mean, that's what I wanted, I'm like, I want to be part of a thing, and to be part of that group of guys, and I think that's really why the identity piece is huge. I literally just had this talk with that guy that I was telling you I had dinner with last night. And we were having a talk about identity and how that can change over life, because a lot of these guys, I mean, he's a pretty high speed guy, and, did like 6 deployments or something like that. And
Yes.
he was talking about like all these military guys that he knows who are all kind of high speed guys. And like, he said there's a part in a movie, I forget which movie he was saying it is, but he said, in Top Gun 2. He said Top Gun 1, trash movie. Top Gun 2, amazing. He's like, I don't even like Tom Cruise. It was a good movie. And he's like, and he says this, one of the things, he's like, like, I'm not, a fighter pilot is not something to do. It is what I am. It's his complete identity. And we were talking about how that could be a problem. Because these guys,
sure.
then again, I'm in the military, they don't have an identity, and they like, who am I now? But that is one of the reasons that they go in. I mean, like, dudes join the Marines because the pictures and what a Marine stands for and what it is and like all that, they want to be that. They want to be a warrior. They want to be that thing. To be able to say, I am that thing. And, dudes will be like 70 and driving around with like, once a Marine, always Marine bumper sticker. It is a full identity that they've achieved, and that is, I mean, and I think that's valid. And he was arguing about like, that's maybe not something that you want to make your full identity for your entire life, but it is, as far as a valid modern initiation, the military absolutely is. It does do that. It does give you an identity, and that's what people are really looking for. And that's why, like, what are you being initiated into? Well, a Marine, like that is, there's an answer to that question there. Right. And that's why, I mean, I'm not going to name names or like go down the rabbit hole of these groups that everybody likes to make fun of, but obviously some of these, getting hazed like a SEAL for a weekend kind of things, and all these kind of boot camp scenarios. Well, at the end of that boot camp, you don't get to be a Marine. You don't get to be a Navy SEAL. You don't get to be anything. You just get to be like, I got hazed for a weekend.
Yeah, you didn't go through a rite of passage. You went through a vision quest, and whether that's has any value or not, it might have some psychological value to you, but it's not going to do the same thing that buds does if what you're looking for is the social validation, the honor, the identity, as you say. It's an identity as a group, as a socially validated thing in many ways.
Yeah. And I think what many of these people want, like you said, is it an end point or a transition? And technically those things are supposed to be transitions, but these guys, they want, I think in many cases what they're looking for in those kind of events and some of these retreats and whatever, hopefully is like this paragraph said, I can't get my shit together. I want to do a ritual, and rituals are kind of good for this. I've not had a lot of luck with it, to be honest, in my own life. I've done a lot of rituals for a lot of different reasons, and usually the ones like, I'm going to start over. It never really works.
Yeah.
That's not like, I mean, I don't know how many quit smoking rituals I did, but it usually doesn't work that way.
I'll tell you an initiation ritual that, and you might get a chuckle out of this, an initiation ritual that was going to change my life completely or restart and everything, and which did, was my wedding. I think focusing on the wedding as an example of an initiation ritual is a funny thing because it illustrates that the mechanism by which it changes your life is not what a lot of the sort of Jungian mythopoetic oriented men think that it is. It's no. You've just been legally bound to this other person, a woman in my case, which is very, very different psychology. You've got a lot to learn before you get married, or after you get married. And in many ways, that's not a point that many people have brought up, is that the tragedy of like romance novels and Nicholas Sparks movies is that they set up this horrifically misleading expectation where, as with the mythopoetic men's movement and initiation, they depict the wedding as the end of the story. It's like, that's when the plot has concluded.
Then happily
and
ever
the wedding is synonymous exactly with the happily ever after. And they don't show the, like, Johnny picks up a drinking habit and Betty puts on 40 pounds and they're not sure how they feel about each other. And, oh my gosh, where did this gambling addiction come from? And you're only beginning to learn about how this thing works. It's, if you thought that getting married is, now I win, now I have an identity. It's like, now you have all of the challenges that come along with this identity too. So it depends on what you're after in these initiations and stuff. Now, it does give you an identity, and maybe that matters, and maybe that's very important. I'm very pro marriage. I'm not one of these people who thinks that marriage is outdated or outmoded, although there are some real questions about that these days. But anyways, it's just a digression example of like these rituals are often very legal. And I'm reminded of the Dead Birds documentary done in the 1960s by a guy named Wilson, if I remember correctly. It was a documentary about this tribe in Southeast Asia. I want to say Papua New Guinea. Their whole world is filled with magic. There's a spell to guard a house. They'll build a watchtower and they'll do a spell. And their magic is very perfunctory. It's very matter of fact. It's very like, it's like filling out paperwork in the modern age. Mm-hmm. And, as big of a deal as getting my journeyman card was for me, the like ritual initiation was like taking the test, which I've taken lots of tests in my life, and it's filling out paperwork. It's very perfunctory. It's not, there isn't a whole lot of going on with of like what we would call performative ritual around it. And to bring it back to marriage for a moment, many people get married in courthouses, or at city halls, or Vegas, as the case may be, but that's even more on the performative side. So, but that can still change your life very dramatically, and it can serve as an initiation of sorts, whether you know it or not.
Yeah. And now at that point, are we, and Ed asked this question too. He's like, are we talking about initiations or rites of passage? And I'm
Mm.
like, explain what you think the difference is. Cause I'm like, we could talk about those in a lot of different ways. Like, then they kind of sound like the same thing. Initiations, as I think Mike Doris brought up, uh, that initiations always kind of call to mind the more ritualistic, almost occult side of things. Whereas like rites of passage could be, yeah, somebody get married, somebody very simple things. More the journeyman's thing, so, oh, you've graduated from high school, like things like that. I mean, because that's a graduation ceremony. I wouldn't call that initiation. Like you're not,
No.
it's a mark of completion of a step of a thing.
Yeah.
But initiation seems to what they're really getting at, because I don't want to like misrepresent what they're getting at with looking for initiation, because
That's
it's
the
a
tricky
valid
thing, because they do
concept. Yeah.
equivocate a little bit. They'll use
Sure.
initiation in a few different ways that aren't always the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's important to
Well,
be
and there are a
mindful.
lot of days.
It's true.
There's a lot of days. Like, who are we talking about? So
Joseph
so,
Campbell is not Gillette and
yeah,
Moore, is not Paul Young, is not
right. He's not that guy with the big forehead. So like, like there's a lot of room to move as to who's talking and who's saying what. So we don't necessarily want to be unfair to all of them, because some are saying good things. I mean, we talked about in the Order of Fire, some of the guys jumped in and said like they felt like their first ritual was initiation. And it has more of the form of an initiation than like filling out paperwork. Like it fills that form more, but it's not. I don't call it that, and it's not set up to be that. But it is like we have talked about in the Order, and it just kind of is an idea that's like on ice. But I would like to bring it off ice. Is the idea of having new names after that, which kind of makes it actually more of an initiation. But because I feel like once there's like the experience of talking about a fire ritual and the metaphor of fire and all that stuff like that, and then actually having gone to a fire ritual and being part of it, that's a different. You're in a different place now. Like you've come out of the book and into the real world and done a thing. So that's yeah.
Don't I forget the name of the ritual, but when someone becomes fully initiated, and it's the technical term in this case, into the Catholic Church, they've been baptized, they go through their confirmation and all that. Don't they receive new names?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. There's a Catholic name that they have. It's like an extra middle name, basically, that they take on. Usually, it has to do with a saint that they've identified with. They've picked a saint that they're like, oh, I like this saint, and that's what they do. It's part of their study of getting confirmed. As far as I know, I never got confirmed because I got kicked out of Sunday school before that. But it's that's my understanding of it from a lot of people, and I think several people who I know have those separate names. I'm pretty sure my dad probably has one, because. And this is what we were talking about, religious conversion, in a private conversation today. Me and Dustin were going back and forth about it a little bit, but a lot of some religious conversions are just kind of done for social reasons. Like I mean, my dad converted to Catholicism because my mom was Catholic. Basically, it's not like he was like, I feel in my heart that I must become a Catholic. He didn't give a shit. He's a fucking electrician. He's probably working double jobs, whatever. I'm like, oh, I guess to make her parents happy, now that we're married, I have to go and take these fucking catechism classes on top of all the other shit that I'm doing, living out of a trailer and being an electrician. Like,
did you know that? Did you know that Christopher Hitchens was baptized into the Greek Orthodox Church?
Oh no!
As an adult. Yeah, his first wife was Greek, and so getting baptized into the church was part of the price to pay to get married. So Christopher Hitchens was technically the great atheist of the 2010s was or the 2000s, I suppose, was baptized Greek Orthodox for the same reason, which is kind of amusing.
Yeah, and that happens. That's a lot more conversions happen that way than people like to think.
There was one
you know,
funny
like,
case
yeah.
where a man was so enamored with a woman that he split the entire church for the next, 600 years or so. Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
shattered a country over a woman. It happens. Happens to the best of us.
Many such cases. But yeah, I mean, anyway, so I think just it's an interesting topic to get into, like what, like these guys, like we've talked about magic and all this stuff and giving you a new role and a new identity and a new title and a new name and all that before, but like this specific idea of masculine initiation, I think is kind of more like what people were expect us to talk about, like as far as like that goes, is like, and what that should entail and how, like I said, the people who do it, and there are people are so averse to anything that looks like initiation. Like I participated on this thread because I thought it was obnoxious. It was a jiu-jitsu thread on Instagram, and it was I don't know if we've talked about it before, but there's when people at certain schools, not other ones, when people get their belts, they do a thing called the gauntlet. And you go through gauntlet. Usually people take their shirts off and get whipped by belts. But they're cloth jiu-jitsu belts. It's not like a fucking big deal. Like, and so like all these people in the line will be like, as they go down, and then because they'll be walking with their new belt around their neck, I think, and so like because did I have it around my neck? I forget, but and that's basically the deal. I went through a gauntlet when I got my purple belt, and this one guy was complaining that it was barbaric, and so his gym stopped doing it, and I'm just like, that is about as wholesome and easy as you can get for hazing ritual and whatever. Like, no one gets hurt. I mean, they're like, someone got hit in the eye once. Shut up. Like basically you get red marks all over you, like from the really good hits, and they go away, and that's it, and that's all that happens. And it's just like, man, it's one of those signs of like a completely pussified society that you'd be like this is horrible. We shouldn't have this happen.
This is barbaric. You realize you're participating in a combat sport, right?
Yeah, I'm like, we took each other to sleep. Like, we're trying to break each other's arms and legs. Are you kidding me? It was just a ridiculous conversation, I thought. And there were a lot of like higher up guys who were like, it's stupid, it's barbaric, it's dumb, whatever. And it's honestly, I'm not the guy who like, I don't like to do the whipping part. That's just not my personality. I'm not who I am. I'm not good at jumping into a crowd. Yeah, guys, let's do it. That's just not who I am. I just kind of stood back and let the kids at the end do it. Last time I was there when they were doing it, I didn't really do it, but like the kids, they were doing it and they were having a crazy time. These little kids were like, yeah, going crazy. Yeah, all these adults, whatever. And it's like good fun and wholesome and like and it also has all the qualities of something positive in the sense of like, okay, well, this is something someone worked really hard for. Yeah. And they're having a little bit of an ordeal, like to celebrate. Basically, they're getting hazed very minorly to celebrate in an initiatory way that they are that they've achieved this next level. And as you said, then they have a new kind of identity that comes with that. Like, I mean, I get to put it on my Instagram bio, and like, it's a big deal. People get excited about it. I mean, we had one of our guys in the order got his blue belt the other day, and like that's people. It's a big moment, and so like I think to have no ceremony, it's fine. I would be just as happy if someone like gave me this handshake and here's your belt. Yeah, I got Shark Tanked for my blue belt, and I'm of the mind of like porque no los dos, like why not Shark Tank them and put them through the gauntlet? That's all fine. But I think that's a really positive modern initiation that people are still trying to do away with because it feels like too much, and I think what I've talked about myth before is that myth taps into the emotional side of us, these unconscious side of us, the emotional side of us. That's why we like to watch movies about things that could never happen or like that we don't think could ever happen. Like whether it's sci-fi or dragons or whatever, it lights up the imagination, and it gives us this poetry for our lives, and all this metaphor, and a powerful ritual is going to do that as well. It's creating an emotional experience to go with the, yes, now you get to go through the blue door instead of the red door. It's creating an emotional transition, and something that sticks in your head and is powerful emotionally to you. And that's really what I think these guys want, is to have this moment. And like you said, to have it be the end is the wrong mentality. Because obviously if they're getting initiated into anything authentically, then it just really starts at the beginning. Now you have this new role and you have this new thing to do. But to have this emotional experience that's memorable and mythic, I think is something that men are right to want.
Yeah.
And all the things, the problems of society right now, I don't think it's the root cause of why men have problems, but
I wonder if this is the crux of the problem, though, and maybe we've unwrapped the issue by thinking about the jujitsu belt whipping ritual,
right?
Because if men are looking for an identity and respect and honor within an honor group, whether that's a jujitsu gym or U.S. military or what have you, that doesn't come from like a 1 or 2 hour ceremony, let alone a 15-minute ceremony. The evidence of that is in the months, if not years, of preparation and training that they put in before that. All of the studying, all the training, all the practice, the suffering, the lost hours and lost sleep in many cases. And then, there's some culmination in some kind of test very often. And then after that, there's a celebration. And the celebration, which is often the ritual component, is sort of is treated as the initiation. And it is in some regard, because it's a threshold into the thing, but it's also the conclusion of that preliminary phase. It's very often actually coming out of the liminal state. You know what I'm saying? And a wedding,
it finalizes the liminal state.
And a wedding is a really weird exception to that rule, because what you're being initiated into is the till death do us part, in theory. So they front load the celebration. There's not training and a known curriculum that people go into before getting married. So just people find out, oh, they're getting married, and we don't know how they're doing. They're just, they're married now, I guess. But with most other cases, if you hit E5 in the military, for example, you might get a pinning ceremony where they get your pin, and instead of nicely putting it on your lapel, they stick it on your chest and punch you in the chest, and you get these spikes in your pecs, and everyone has a good chuckle about it. Enduring the pain of a couple spikes is not what makes everybody trust you as an E5,
right?
It's all the work you did as an E3 and an E4 that people know about that makes them trust you as an E5 and acknowledge your legitimacy in that role. So if we want to talk about magic, I think it's actually very similar to the magic we were talking about before, in the crafting and sculpting of this concept of legitimacy. Being a black belt is a matter of legitimacy and recognition, official recognition within a certain institution. Because if you have a black belt in one school, you don't necessarily have a black belt in another. Being an electrician is a matter of legal legitimacy. Being married is a matter of legal legitimacy. And so, like, the crafting of that legitimacy, I think, is what we're talking about, just at the level of the individual rather than at the level of the state, which is kind of what we were talking about a little bit before, and justice and so forth. And so a good initiation will convey that legitimacy not just to the individual, which also matters. And I think that's what the mythopoetic movement is touching on, that feeling yourself to be legitimate, whereas you felt like an imposter before, that mental transformation.
Right.
But that's maybe not separate from the legitimacy in the eyes of other people, you know. So it's one of the reasons vision quests can be kind of ambiguously successful at best in some cases, if what you're looking for is legitimate, a legitimate identity or a legitimate role or rank in a hierarchy that is respected and acknowledged and honored by other people that you care about.
Yeah. I mean, it just, like I said, it's
and so if people, sorry, to sort of close that circle, if people are confusing the celebratory ritual at the end for the process that preceded the ritual, as is the case with buds, for example, which is preceded by like boot camp and, you know, anywhere between 3 and 7 months of buds prep at Great Lakes. We got to see those guys running around. You know, a lot of the training is done in advance of that, and then you go through Hell Week, and then you get the more technical SQT trainings and so forth. But like the celebratory ritual is not the initiation if what you're looking for in the initiation is the legitimacy in the eyes of other people and in the eyes of yourself that you're hoping to find.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's legitimacy, and that's one thing, and that depends what you're like with jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. That's definitely a part of that. I think
I mean, what's the purpose of a belt in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, it's definitely an acknowledgement of a skill or knowledge level, I would say.
Why would people not be satisfied with being just extremely skillful white belts? You know, the sort of white belt that will regularly beat purple and even black belts.
Well, I mean, that was Clint for like 4 years. But
you want that next belt.
Some people are into that. That's why his name is Clint McSandbag. Because he tried to stay a white belt for too long. Like, some people will do that, and they don't want the extra like affirmation or the recognition. They just want to do the thing, and that's its own mentality. Sure. A lot of people want the recognition because it's worth something socially and whatever. I think what people are looking for in initiation, what this kind of stuff is trying to get at, is more the not so much the legitimacy as a feeling of completeness, or like a feeling that I've because that's what they're saying is like men don't have this feeling of being men. I mean, that's the root of what they're talking about with masculine initiation. Is like there's no transition from being a boy to a man. And like, there's just like, oh, I graduated from high school, get the fuck out of my house or whatever. Yeah. Which apparently is an Anglo thing. Of it's come up on Twitter recently. Like only white people get their kids out at they're 18. And everybody argued no, it's a boomer thing. But so. I mean, they're looking for something, an emotional experience that lets them feel like, okay, I have a different role. I'm a different kind of guy. I mean, these guys are obviously trying to plug all kinds of Jungian shit into it. That is maybe good, maybe shit, maybe good. But it's. I think that for a lot of it, what they're looking for is a punctuation mark of like, okay, now I've crossed this threshold. Because without it, they feel like, well, when does boyhood end and when does manhood begin? And
Well,
that's really the discussion that they've been having for 34 years since this book came out. Is like, when am I a man? And I get that question from young men all the time, like, when am I a man?
That's funny.
And dudes will say, dudes who are married and have kids, they'll say, when you're married and have kids. That is so fucking common. They'll be like, you're not really a man until you have children.
I was sitting
on X like once a week.
I was sitting in the hospital, well, not the hospital, at the medical office at MCRD, in preparation for an appointment, and a couple of young grads, 18, 19-year-old kids, came in who just finished the was it the Reaper, the conclusion of Marine Corps boot camp. And I was like around the corner, and I was overhearing them talking. They were super hyped up because they'd finished, and they were like, one of them said to the other, these are 18, 19-year-old kids, like, oh, people who haven't finished boot camp aren't really men. And like, I didn't want to hold it against them because they don't know what they don't know,
Right.
It was just funny sitting there, like, hearing them say that. And like, I know, so like, even as a, how old was I at the time? 20, 21, I think I was 20. Like, even as a 20-year-old kid, I knew so many guys. I'd known so many men who were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who were extremely competent, physically capable, could handle all kinds of responsibility, and were everything that anyone in history would consider like a real man in age and whatever metric you want to take, and who had not finished boot camp, had never gone in the military at any point in their life. And here are these two kids who are very much still kids talking about how they're real men and other men aren't. And but it begs the question, is manhood something as broad and as held together by a family resemblance model of associative nodes in a sort of cloud of features? Is that the kind of thing that it is even possible to be initiated into? Or can you only be initiated into certain roles, and some of those roles bring one closer to this electron cloud of features that we associate with being more or less of a man? Because I think there is a risk here that we have dazzled ourselves with literary coming of age stories like Old Yeller and so forth into thinking that manhood is the kind of thing that you can not be in 1 minute and have passed into in the next. And maybe there is some sorcery you can do on yourself to convince yourself of that. But
the argument that's being made in this is that, and in all these kind of texts, is that, and they're skipping because they're liberals, is that in a homogenous society, your answer gets simple. You can in a homogenous society, you can, where everyone has the same religion and the same values and the same definition of what a man is. You can perform a manhood ceremony and boom, tomorrow you're a man. Everybody's going to treat you different. And there's examples.
And all the men in other societies are not real men. Only Spartan women give birth to real men.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the deal, and they're not real men, therefore it's okay to kill them. That's how the train works. But they're not real men, and also abominations to God, because they don't worship the right gods. So therefore, it's okay to kill them. They're basically demons, and so they're demon children.
What was the X meme about the neighboring tribe cracks me up. They think the sky god came from the blood of the quail, when we all know it was the snake of the serpent or something.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really like, it's enough. If we need to dehumanize them to rip their faces off later, then that's what we're going to start with. Like, they're not real men, and they're abominable. They don't worship the right gods. They're not real. I mean, it's in the Rig Veda. Basically, like, half the things are like, we are the people who do it right. Those are the people who do it wrong. They're shifty and liars and whatever, and we are good and blameless. And that's
It's the
our
Virgin
gods are
Chad
right, theirs
meme.
are wrong.
It's the
Yeah, oh yeah,
Chad Virgin
100%.
from
Yeah, and it's
4000
just
BC or whatever.
and that's true throughout societies. And so, like, yeah, if you have a homogenous society where everyone has the same values and the same definition of manhood, yes, you can perform a ritual in which you're a man the next day. And there are rituals where, because I'm just skimming through a bunch of these examples, like rituals where like your parents forget you, you're not allowed to like talk to your parents anymore. Like you're a man now. Like shit like that. I mean, and just different sizes. Like some tribe in Africa, like that, and it's like, okay, you're a man now. You went to the forest, you came back. Everybody's supposed to act like they don't know who you are anymore, because you're a man, and like you're an independent creature that's different. And so, yeah, people did rituals like that all around the world where you maybe didn't forget your family, but where like you were initiated into manhood, and then
That's true.
You had a distinct role that changed, and you maybe a different name, maybe a different people reacted to you different. You could marry now, you could do all these things that you couldn't do before, and it just depends on the culture, but we can't have that in a pluralistic society because the definitions of manhood are so different. So you have to have these compartmentalized initiations into manhood, and that's I think the rub is that what you were getting at is that these things like, can you really be initiated into the whole entirety of manhood? Well, what does that mean, and to who? And so like you can
is that within a discrete and more or less isolated culture, an initiation into manhood as a whole actually would be possible.
Yes. Yeah. Which is how humans lived for most of human history. Right. There's discrete and isolated cultures. Like okay, like if you were a Roman male citizen, there were expectations. Like this is how you were going to behave. That was a whole identity. And the same is true, if you're an Athenian citizen, like a male citizen, like whatever. That's a whole thing. But once you get into a society where like you have like hundreds of different religions, all these different political people, you have people who don't even don't know what a woman is, don't know what a man is. You're like they're like, how do you get initiated into that? It's a mess, and that's the thing. So the only way we can have valid initiations is these compartmentalized things that you're talking about, like an initiation into manhood that would be valid would be like, say, a Christian men's group, and like of our church in our set of beliefs, and this is what our Christian men's group believes. We can initiate you into that. Right. And now you have been initiated as a Christian man of ... and that's clear, like that. This is what if people are doing that, and I think people do, the religious groups that do that, and all kinds of groups who do that. But then once the expectation is clear of what you're being initiated into, I could see the completeness of that and why you're looking for that. But you have to have, I think the religious component is really important to that. And to do it in a secular way is kind of tricky. And that's why, like I said, there needs to be some emotional, some mythic element to it. I think that's just beyond like, well, I can see from the report that you've now stopped growing and you're, you're over 18 years old. So, I mean, that's all, that's state manhood. But to actually get into the role of manhood, you have to understand what that role is. So I think that's a different, it's definitely creating a different, sense of that thing. But
maybe Old Yeller is actually a better model than what I was giving it credit for, because it is a myth, not in the grand supernatural sense, but it is a kind of sacred story that many Americans sort of aspire to live by. Is that a man is, no matter the age, a male who takes responsibility for the family, does the hard things, including killing the family dog if necessary, and like looks out for the household as this sort of guardian, caretaker, and responsible agent. and the line between boy and man is captured sort of symbolically in that moment where he says, "No, Pop, I'll do it." You know,
Mhm.
or I'm not sure if that was precisely the line or not. It's been like
Right.
25 years since I've seen it, but yeah, and does that capture the entirety of the difference between a boy or an adolescent and a man? Well, like obviously not, but it
No.
does give a kind of symbolic framework for what that transformation or what that movement entails, what it's primarily about.
Yeah.
So maybe on the other end of some liminal state
Mhm.
of growth and being no man for some time, um, a ritual that reenacts one of these kinds of sacred myths
Mhm.
about that transformation might be very useful and helpful, and might finalize that transformation with some socially accepted um, legitimacy in a ritually meaningful manner, which is probably I don't are male rites of passage a human universal. I know you were looking over one of these lists. I don't remember if
I mean, I'd have to go to the list and see.
yeah.
I mean, I have the big list, but
I don't
I have to
remember
go
if
and search it. But
male rites of passage were on there or not, but whether it's truly universal or not, it's quite widespread
yeah,
around all
yeah. I
of
mean, you can find them on
humanity.
every continent for
Yeah,
sure. I mean, this book I was reading, it was jumping around like continent to continent, like constantly. It's definitely a thing that people have done.
speaking
Well,
of
yes,
film versions of it, one of my favorite examples of this is there's a Viggo Mortensen movie called Captain Fantastic, which is about
okay,
this kind of uh, homesteading off the grid family, kind of left of center libertarian kind of family. They like
hmm
have a Noam Chomsky day and stuff. But Viggo Mortensen is the father, and I don't remember who plays the son. But the very opening scene of the movie is it's this deer in the Pacific Northwest forest, and the son ambushes and kills this deer with a knife.
hmm
Like comes out of the bushes and gets it. And it wasn't just hunting though. It was hunting. They do take the meat and eat it. But the father, the Viggo Mortensen says like, "You are now a man," and touches him on the face with the blood. And it's like, this is exactly what we saw at Wolfgang. This is what we were
yeah,
doing. And it was weirdly like it was the same kinds of things, and here it is in this one, and there the honor group is just the family, just the father
right.
recognizing and acknowledging the son, and the daughters are there too, which is kind of cool.
Well,
But it's
definitely,
a very
and
cool illustration.
I mean that is one of those traditions that probably was about ready to die, and I think because of the men's space, I think recently things that have happened in the past like 5 or 6 years, there's just been a huge surge. Um, from like the Ryan Micklers and whatever the guys who got super hardcore into hunting.
Mhm.
I think there's been a real big resurgence of men getting blooded, like of young men getting blooded on their first time, or maybe older men getting blooded because a lot of people don't start it until later in life. But I mean, and I think I love that. I mean, I think that's one of the most authentic rituals. I don't know if it, like I said, does complete manhood in a society that's a hunting society that
It's
where they
pretty
hunt for
important.
food. It's pretty fucking important. Yeah, I mean, I tend to, people would probably be offended by this, but I tend to think of hunting as a gentleman's sport at this point, because it's expensive. You don't need to do it. It's like if you can take 3 weeks off to go hunting, like you're living a very luxurious lifestyle, and so I think that yeah, I mean, but I think it's a really valid, and I think I love seeing it when like young men get blooded in, or anybody really, from doing that, because it is an important experience. To be able to hunt something and kill it, and I just did the killing, but like it's yeah, to actually go through that, I think is pretty powerful. and transformative, I think, for a lot of those guys. It's just, because they've been working hard at this thing. Like I was talking to my buddy last night. Like I had a couple friends who were like, like they go. He's like, that's why they call it hunting, not killing. Because I'm like, I've watched enough of Friends to like waste, like 3 weeks in the woods or 4 weeks in the woods or whatever and get nothing. And I'm like, I don't have that kind of time. I mean, that's cool that they did it. I respect it. But like, that's no. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So that blooding in is an acknowledgement of all that time and energy that goes into that thing. But yeah.
Well, we've been going for a little over an hour. We've got some comments here.
Cool.
Suffer No Illusion says, "Go get me the blinker fluid." Yes, very important to have on your rig. Suffer No Illusion also says, "I was 38 when we crossed the equator. I'm not rolling around in slop, wearing my uniform backwards and acting a fool just so the shellbacks can laugh." Yeah, and that's not even the worst of the of those equatorial shenanigans stories. And he gave me the right word. He said the Crucible is the culmination exercise in MC Basic, not the Reaper. Maybe the Reaper was the part of the Crucible, like the final ruck hike, or maybe it's been a while for me. So yeah. So the Crucible is the name of the full experience. Daniel Rose says, "Initiation is also a rebalancing of responsibility for the group. The boy will now pull his weight like all the men." That reminds me, Matthew Crawford put out a really, really good, I'll see if I can find it real quick.
It looked relevant. I saw it come up in my feed. I was like, oh, that's a relevant title. Work suitable for a man or something like that.
Yes, work befitting a man, a story about the upside of communal life. And what it was the story of, you should go read it. I'll post the link to, I think it's probably behind a paywall, but it's worth going through. I'll post that in the main chat, not just the I'll share it in the live chat as well, just for fun. But it's basically it tells about Matthew Crawford's experience as a 14-year-old doing work as an electrician with the men, because he's on this commune, kind of this very like Hindu guru commune growing up, and the men and women were kind of separated, but the men were like different and were treated with this kind of reverence and respect. They didn't have to do the morning prayers that everyone else had to do because they had to get up early. They had very important work to do, this kind of thing. And he described having to go through this attic, which was dusty, and take notes on the sheet of paper. And he's getting his arm scraped up on sheet metal that's up there and leaving important notes. And he's told by the electrician who's like prepping this place for this commune to come live in. He's like, now, if you don't write everything down correctly, everyone could die in a fire. So like, it's very important that you get everything. And he's just like, like I don't want to be the cause of everyone's death. And the head foreman was like, I know you can do it. I know I can trust you. So he's like, 14-year-old kid's like, has this responsibility. And so he describes coming down out of the attic just covered in dust and a little bit of blood, and he gets to eat with the men. And it was this very transformative experience for him as a 14-year-old boy. And is that a ritual? Well, no. Was it like magic done? Probably not intentionally. Was it initiation? Absolutely it was. It was an experience of transformation. I'll put it once this goes. Can I post it in the regular chat comments before? No, I can't. I'll just wait. And I'll leave it as a comment at the end of once we stop going live. But it's a great little piece. Work Befitting a Man, a story about the upside of communal life by Matthew Crawford. That was from September 12th. So cool. Anyways.
Cool.
I'll show the live chat again. Kalev Knight. Young men need at least familial separation ritual to at least show the protective, slightly devouring mother that the son is now a man.
You know, there was a guy who, this is a kind of an old school heathen dude who I knew, one of the early, like he was old, so he was of the old guard of like the 70s, basically, who came up with basically Germanic paganism in America, and he said that he, and this really impressed me at the time when he told it to me, that he did a ritual with his son, um, basically where, you know, gave him like a sword and a shield or something like that, like this ceremonial thing where he like, and his mother sent him to go with his father, like this
Nice.
ritual, you know. So that was like, this is coming of passage, and I was like, that's great. I think that's fantastic that you did that.
Yeah.
That was a really cool thing. And so that kind of thing. I mean, people have tried to reproduce those things, and I think that's a great, if you can create something like that for a young man, within the context of your family. I mean, that's very meaningful.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, well, that's, you know, because then they'll tell other people, like, the other kids will probably be secretly jealous. They'll make fun of him, but they'll be secretly jealous. Like, you know, like, we did a thing, like, oh no, that if the parents both take it seriously, then everyone else, like, then it'll be serious, you know. And I've heard of a lot of people doing things like that and been inspired by work like mine and work like this, to go do something like that. And I highly encourage that. And I've had guys ask me, like, what can I make a rite of passage for my son? And I think that's a very valid question. And I think that there's a lot of, like, we're talking about what a lot of the components would be.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, you're not supposed to be with your mother anymore. Like, you're supposed to be, you know, going the path of man and learning how to be a man. What conversation were we? Was it our conversation, or maybe another one I was having? I don't know. Recently, that someone said their job was to follow the father all around. For like, it was like they were young men who had just were. Someone said it. Maybe it was like, I don't know, was it what society it was in? I want to say it was Roman or something like that. But it was like for the last 2 years of his life, all his job was to do was like follow his father around and see all the stuff that he did.
Huh.
You know, like, and just basically shadow his father. And so he knew what it was to, like, say if you were running a household, you know, like running a whole full like household with servants, or with a business or something like that. Your job is to follow your dad, and that's a very I think transformative thing as well.
As far as Caleb's comment about young men need at least familial separation ritual, maybe not bad for some men, to, as good as it can be to shadow the father like that and to learn by his example, it can also be good to get out from your father's shadow and out of his boots and to be your own person to a degree as well. But as far as separation from the mother in particular, there's actually a funny passage in Matthew Crawford's piece about the benefits of gender segregation. And he said, you know, males and females were generally segregated in the ashram, so I saw a little of my mother and sister. This suited me just fine as an adolescent boy. But and we see this with maybe one of the first literary rites of passage in Western canon. I'm speaking of the Odyssey, where the first we hear of Telemachus after he is inspired by Mentor, who is Athena in disguise. Kind of interesting dynamic there. But the first thing he does is he admonishes his mother. And this is something that Emily Wilson takes great, of course, umbrage with, because she doesn't understand the dynamic, and is like, his greatest thing is talking back to his mother, as if this is like a violation of politeness and not a symbolic act of differentiation and individuation of yourself as a man. And that's what that's about. And of course, the modern ideologues always miss the deeper points in these kinds of stories. And it's a very important one, though. And it's a something that I think many men, some of whom I know in my personal life, unfortunately, fail to successfully accomplish. And it doesn't mean you can't have a good relationship with your parents and even your mother. But you do need to go through some period of time apart from them and saying, no, I'm not going to accept your guidance. I'm not going to accept your help. I'm not going to accept your money. I'm not going to accept your advice. I want to do this on my own, no matter how hard that's going to be. And I do
feel like
think
that's very Northern European of you to say that.
It might be.
Okay.
But if you're,
I'm thinking of like some Italian nana being like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Well, that might be very Northern European of me.
I think it is.
So maybe you can put an asterisk on that and say, well, if I'm living in a Northern European culture and I'm looking for the respect and honor of other men, then maybe that's something I should do. If you are a Mexican, or if you are a modern Greek, not an ancient Greek, but a modern Greek, or Italian, Sicilian, you don't need to listen to me on that singular point. But maybe if you are Northern European and living in a Northern European culture and you want the respect of Northern European men, might be something worth considering.
Yeah. I think like Mexicans keep them around for a long time. But also like, okay, time to go out and go to work. I mean, they're going to work and they're doing other stuff that with the men, I think, but like they're around the family all the time. Definitely, it's a which is I think probably healthy and normal. It makes them very healthy oriented.
It's a different way and a perfectly valid way to live, and they've got their own notions of manhood, which I'm, to be totally honest, less familiar with. Although I'm sure you can get a glimpse of what those kinds of things look like through cultural pieces like, say, The Godfather.
Or just we're in America, so coworkers. Like people live a little different. I mean, we had Mexicans live across the street from us in the Dalles even, and like they're there all the time, doing big barbecues and stuff like that. And it's just it's definitely like they're at each other's houses all the time. But I think but the separation part, I think the speaking to your mother differently is a big that is a big step. And I don't know that that's specific to a culture or not. But I think speaking to your mother differently, like, okay, no. No, I'm a grown man. We're not going to do that. I mean, obviously I do that. I talk to my mom once a week, and but and she's like, you better not do that. I'm like, I'll do what I want. Advice listened to. You've been heard. I'll do what I want, but thanks for caring. I mean, I think it's important to be at that point where you can do that to your mother, because there are a lot of henpecked dudes who can't do that to their mother, and then they become henpecked by their wives. Like that.
Yeah,
that's a kind of a transition, because then they look for that's a big problem with dudes looking for mommy wives. Who are just going to
there may be some non-initiatory psychology at work there, where if you're trying to be a man to your wife, but you're a kind of a mama's boy to your mother,
right?
You are stoking resentment from your wife towards your mother.
That seems very likely. Yes.
Because your wife wants to be number one in the women in your life, and she should be.
For sure.
Daniel Rose says, yes, it cuts the spiritual umbilical cord and frees the man to take his life in his own direction. Yeah, but maybe we have to be careful with that, because the goal with initiation, as we've been talking about it, is to be a little bit less of an individual in some regard, or at least to contextualize your individuality within a group and to accept their notions of what is good and evil and honorable and so forth as a framework for your individual pursuit. But
100%.
As far as separating from cutting the spiritual umbilical cord, yes, absolutely.
Well, I could say I figured it was going to come up at some point, and I mean, because obviously, like I said, I've been through the jiu-jitsu thing initiation. I think that's a like a rite of passage of some kind. But I've been through what these guys want at least once. I mean, I've been through a real initiation, and that's and a really well done one for as many things that about that group that were not the best. Obviously, when I was initiating the wolves, like it took a year or 9 months, something like that. There was reading involved. There's I was not, because I was a public figure, I was not hazed in the way that other people were. I was an adult, a public figure. I was kind of given it easy, but some of those guys got just the worst. They just treated them terrible. But man, what they did right is exactly what people are looking for when they say they're looking for this. I mean, speaking an oath, surrounded by a whole bunch of dudes who all have their hand on me, saying it along with me. And that's like you are part of us. And that's what they want. That's what dudes want. And and in that moment, and for probably a month or a few months afterwards, I probably would have told you that was the coolest moment of my life. That was really powerful. You work to get it. Is it going to be this time? Is it going to be next time? Am I going to get it? It's kind of like the belt thing. Are we going to do it this time? Are you ready? Do you have it memorized? And then saying that in the context of this bigger ritual with all these people watching, like strangers and outsiders who were watching it, but all the people who I was being oathed to were all basically touching me. And that's a really good way to do it. That's symbolically and whatever. That's I think a really solid way to do that. And of course, there isn't pictures of mine, but there's pictures of other people having that. So I'm not spilling their beans or whatever. But I mean that's well done. And I think that is what a lot of these people want, is to become part of a we. And that's kind of what you were saying, as far as you're losing a little bit of individuality by becoming part of this we, and then you're beholden to this we. And
the grandiosity of some of the stories shared by the group, and some of those stories are the initiations themselves in some cases, becomes common points of reference and sort of framework in this grand story of who we are.
Sure.
There was one that I attended, which had some fantastic photography done in a cave.
Yeah, I know. That's the one you're at.
I remember. It was incredible, but it also had some funny moments too.
Many.
There
was much fighting after it was over, but But I mean, that was and that was engineered to be obviously pretty fucking impressive. We had a goddamn camera crew a mile back into a cave, it was pretty intense. But and that was not the way it was normally done. That was like hold my beer. This is how we're going to do it. But and then I mean, very very powerful stuff. And you could. I mean, that's. I think a lot of people would like to have that experience. Now, it just depends who you're being. It's can you get that with guys who are not kind of trying to be a motorcycle club? Because then you get all the motorcycle club bullshit that goes with that. And all the other stuff that went with that. But
and it's if your aspiration is to be a dude who has a nice lawn and plays fantasy football on the weekends and works his job as an insurance salesman during the week, you are going to have a very hard time finding that.
Well, and I think that's probably what a lot of these things cater to. But I don't know if these guys go play fantasy football or not. But the guys who go to these things. I mean, because I was looking at, actually, because I was sending your wife an email the other day about marketing. I was going through all these different places because I'm trying to get our sign up page better. And I'm here's a whole bunch of these things. They're selling initiations, or they're selling like a group membership or whatever. Like, here's what our space looks like. Like, if you can have a look at this, maybe it'll give you some idea of what we should be doing. You know,
what space looks like. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like all these guys who, I mean, from guys that I like a lot to guys that are like, like, look at this. This is gay. I literally said in an email, like, this is gayer than AIDS, but they have a good marketing page. But what they're saying is the worst. I mean, I think, as someone told me that, I should probably let executives with money LARP more, because that's where the money is. So the guy that said that has the manicured lawn and the like $300,000 a year job needs to pay $3,500 for that weekend and get initiated. Whereas the guys who want to do it authentically are usually not the same guy. Right. So
yeah, that is the trade-off and the challenge there. And it's like, what's the importance of, like, authenticity versus appearance versus and that's a struggle with everything. I mean, even something as legitimate as being an electrician, a lot of it is about the appearance, to the point where it's actually a code. In Article 110, you are expected to do things in a craftsman-like manner. What does that have to do with fire safety? Absolutely nothing. It's just about a certain degree of the appearance of professionalism, which is important and which matters.
And that's why I think with our stuff that we do, I always look at what's the outside facing thing is. This is something you're going to be proud of doing. And so you want to create rituals that like, obviously there are always going to be people be like, you're a LARPing or whatever, but there's like, okay, is this something that is reasonable? Like, is it something that's reasonable and cool? And some people might think it's weird, but is it going to be something where it looks like you said, legitimizing rather than like degrading?
Well, I'm jumping ahead in the comments here a little bit, which we'll get to in a second. But someone's bringing up Greek stuff, and I think there's a lot of people who suffer from a sort of false Platonist dichotomy, where they think if you are focusing on the appearance of something, it necessarily means you are therefore not focusing on the true substance of a thing. If you are focused at all on how you appear as a professional, that is in some sense, in some way, compensation for what you lack in your authentic skill. And this is something I think Tanner Guzzi spends a good 60% of his time making fun of on Instagram. This idea that like real men don't care how they look. It's like, well, actually, like, in every institution that has the ritual power to differentiate real men from fake men, whether that's a labor union or the Catholic Church, all these people care a lot about how they look. The Catholic Church is notorious for this.
So you think that comes from you said the Platonic?
Well, I mean, that's one of Plato's big questions, isn't it? Is the appearance of goodness, of justice, or to really be just? It's the book 2 conundrum of the man who is just, but and of course, like, Plato is so tricky because he'll give you questions to ponder without necessarily giving an answer. But because he always likes to try to steel man all of the arguments in different directions, it can look like he's taking a side on like, you should focus on the truth and not the appearance of the truth. You should focus on being good and not only seeming good, as if those two were mutually exclusive. And it is something to ponder. It is something to think about, because you don't want to find yourself so focused on appearance that you neglect the substance behind, but there's no reason you can't do both. And I've been specifically told by one journeyman in particular that I should upgrade. We talked about this before on another live stream about upgrading my screwdrivers from screwdrivers with electrical tape wrapped around it to actual proper, like, factory made insulated screwdrivers, because they look more professional. I have the correct
Right.
tools for the job. Never mind that they both work the same. This one looks like it does
Yeah.
the job correctly. And part of your job is to bring peace of mind to the customer. So in fulfilling the job, appearance matters. And it's true in other things as well.
Yeah. And as you said, they don't have to be, it's a balance. Like you can overweight one of them to the other, but
Yes.
they aren't mutually exclusive. And I feel like people who don't understand the power of optics are sitting at the kiddie table.
Right.
You know, like you don't know that doesn't matter. It's like I remember the manosphere back in the day, or like any of these kind of right wing movements or whatever, whatever you would call it. Like the covers of the books were absolute trash. They might as well have made it with like MS Paint or whatever. Oh, you put words on a page. Good job, moron. Yeah. You spent like months, maybe years writing a book, and you spent zero time on the cover, which is what actually sells it. Because it's so good that it doesn't. No, it always matters. And so and anyone who doesn't understand it, like I said, they're like, you don't understand the grown-up world yet. Those things actually matter. And so, you have to care about both. I mean, it's like, we've talked about that with aesthetics in the group. It's like, don't pretend that it doesn't matter if people look good. Because the better people look, the more you get more people who are like higher status, and it like attracts like. And so, if everybody, like I said, if everybody went to our rituals in I put that in the article actually the other day. If you show up in sweatpants, and it's a sweatpant ritual, and then we can have it outside of a trailer. That's if you look the part, then it has a different feel. And then it captures the imagination in a different way, and people have to care about those kind of things.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about psychological changes in state. These things affect your psychology.
Yeah.
Daniel Rose says initiation requires leadership from the men facilitating it, which is hard for men with no leadership role outside the Empire of Nothing.
Right.
Yeah. Cal of Night says, I think a modernly practical unintended rite of passage is getting a driver's license. That's an interesting one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting one because it's not just a ticket to freedom of movement in a way that you didn't have before. And also makes you useful to your friends who don't yet have driver's license and therefore important.
Right.
But it's also a kind of state acknowledgement of trust, and maybe a very low degree of trust if you're under 22. But some degree of trust. It's like you have official license to do this dangerous thing now.
Yeah.
Caleb Knight says, I have heard that when reading the Greek tales, you need to consider is it the domain under the gods or the god? It could be Telemachus post small war strategy challenge. I'm having a hard time understanding the question there. Oh, the domain under the god's name. Or the god. It could be. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question there. But I saw the word Greek there, and it reminded me that there is a school of thought, and this is not my original idea, but we did a whole, for anyone who's kind of new to this live stream, we did a very lengthy tour through Plato's Republic. The closest thing I think you can get to some kind of initiation into something without physically attending a space with other people is reading Plato's Republic. That is in many ways designed to be a kind of initiation, and you can't get that experience by only reading it once. You have to go through it and really mull on it. But that's one of those rare texts where it is kind of possible to to have an initiatory experience through a book. And there are other books that can give people initiatory experiences for sure. I don't know if they're intended to be in the magical sense, as is the case with Plato's Republic, and not, at least not to the degree of success that I think Plato was able to pull through there.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a lot of work. It takes a very, you have to be, as Greg Knowledge says, morally and intellectually qualified, and philoi. You have to be near and dear. You have to have a mental connection with the character of the author,
Right.
in order to grasp what he's saying, and not to be an ideologue that is searching for confirmation bias in one direction or another, because that will guarantee that you miss the point and misread the story. So.
Yeah. Now, if you wanted to talk about self-initiation, which I don't really like the idea of self-initiation very much, and to be honest, like self-initiation to me, it overlaps with what you're calling a vision quest a lot, because that's when I think of vision quest, I think of like a dude going out into the woods, or doing, finding something on his own, and so
vision quest has a shaman that's preparing you for months, if not years in advance.
Yeah, for sure. But so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things that are in which no one is there to like witness or be involved in can be a little bullshitty. But in the one podcast I did on the show, I mean, the shaman, the CIA shaman guy, he mentioned the idea of, and he didn't call it an initiation. I don't think he would, but if you want to be a shaman, he was like, go out and spend 3 days in the woods by yourself without a cell phone, or anything like that going on, and just like sit, and like nature will talk to you, and you have an experience. And I think that, well, that's a, and like I said, we can, with all these things, we can overuse words and take them outside of their frame to the point where they become meaningless, and that's the danger with something like initiation, because then we could talk about like some of these big athletic events, like my sister worked so hard, she never got there, but she really wanted to run the Boston Marathon. Now you can pay to run it, but that's not the same. Like if you get a certain time, you get to go run the Boston. I mean, I still think you have to pay, but you can pay a lot more to just run it. But like she wanted to like get the time. Yeah. And she was always like 1.5 minutes short, or like so like she was so close, like so many times, but just never quite got there. And then she was hoping when she got a little older, she'd get in a different category, and like numbers would change, and and I don't think she ever quite got there. She was really close. She's run like 50 marathons or something like that. But that would have been like a super initiatory experience for her. And so there are a lot of big events like that are very just well known.
Is that
and powerful that you can participate,
or is that an accomplishment?
I guess that's what I mean. We can overextend these terms. There's a very similar thing. Like once you've done that, you get to say that you've done it.
Suppose we go to the next Olympics. That we go to the 200 meter freestyle swimming, and
the 200 meter freestyle swimming in drag,
or something, yeah. But being out, and Michael Phelps undergoes a sex change operation and just trounces everybody. So Michael Phelps wins a gold medal. Is that an initiation ritual, or is that just?
That's what I mean. I don't like overextending them to certain things, and it's.
I think we're talking about something above and higher than initiation. Initiation isn't the ultimate, thing, especially if initiation is a threshold, a transition point between two roles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's certain thing where. I can see the lines being blurred in a lot of areas where it's like only an exclusive group of people get to do this, and there's like a thing about it that's like special, and you're now part of the in club that you got to do it. But like like I said, I don't like overextending definitions of words, and that's why even like marriage is an initiation. I'm like, that might be something different, like that kind of stuff. I mean, it's similar process, but like we definitely write a passage. Yeah, definitely magic, definitely write a passage on the stuff there. Is that like what they really mean by initiation? Like
fair enough.
So that we can like all these things we can kind of overextend too far, and so it's just a matter of like it's all these different processes of magic that we've talked about in various shows, and it's just a matter of like which ones apply to like what we really call initiation. And of course, initiation like by itself really doesn't fucking mean anything. It means start. Initiate. So it doesn't really mean that much by itself. It just has a whole bunch of connotations, around it.
Well, and like imagine the story of a hypothetical Navy SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
At 7 years old, he sees a TV show that inspires him, makes him want to do special forces. He, like all of his teens, he's dedicated that. At some point, he goes through boot camp. At some point after that, he makes it through Bud's prep. He goes off to Bud's and he makes it through Hell Week. After making it through Hell Week, he finishes. He gets all through all of his SQTs. Gets his trident pinned on. Sometime after that, he goes on his first deployment, stuck on a sub for 6 months. Not much fun. At some point, he goes on his second deployment. It's in Africa. Gets in a firefight, actually kills a couple people. On his third deployment, he ends up on a stealth chopper somewhere in Pakistan, and he winds up being the guy that takes out bin Laden. Now, one could, with a sufficiently subjective notion of initiation, describe every single point on that very condensed little story as a process of initiation. Seeing a story that inspires you, getting through boot camp, getting through Hell Week, graduating Buds, getting your trident, first deployment, killing someone. Like, would killing bin Laden be an initiation?
No, I think an objective is more like what you're saying, goal.
Yeah,
it's like, I mean, killing someone, that's like getting blooded in a with people,
particularly
like that's a different way. I mean, that's a small club. Like the dudes would be like, I have the confirmed kill club is a club that like dudes can mostly not talk about, from what I understand. But you kind of know that the guys who've done it and the guys who haven't, and I'm sure I know a few who have.
But like at a certain point, a sort of Heraclitean like time is a constantly flowing river of change kind of perspective. One could view every day as a sort of initiation into a new moment. And initiation begins to lose its significance, and the obsession with initiation can water down the meaning of initiation. Right. And I think this is something you were sort of complaining about weeks or maybe months ago. I don't remember, but we had been talking about it and describing this carousel of men seeking after more and more ritual experiences, much in the way that like old Taylor Swift used to go through more and more the excitement of a new relationship. And there might actually be a parallel there between men and women, but but that actually dilutes the significance of initiation and the significance of the identities that we become initiated into. Perhaps.
Yeah, you just have this little keychain of different like things that you've been initiated into. There's a lot of occult guys who do that. They travel around. That's probably what I was talking about. There's a lot of guys who've like initiation and I've been initiated in this, that, and the other thing. I know guys who or have met guys and talked to them will tell you that they've been initiated into like 10 different traditions of things, and it's like, well, are you good at any of them? Like, is that, is it, one of those things. Yeah, you can definitely. I mean, as trivializing as it is, and also feel free to run with that as an Instagram like inspirational reel. Like every day is an initiation into a new part of your life. Like as soon as you were saying it, I was like, that's money. That's like someone's gonna love that. Today I am initiated.
Yeah. And then you get to be an initiate, which is maybe not the highest thing to aspire to be. But
yeah.
Cal of Night has corrected himself. He says, I'm pointing out that in some Greek stories, when it says Poseidon sunk the ship, it could also just be a hurricane and not Poseidon popping up to sink it. Well, yes, I mean, some pagan beliefs are more literal than others, but it's very common to see Poseidon as an anthropomorphization of the sea itself. They are the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's certainly true. And he sends us an apology, £5. Apology money. I'm dyslexic and poorly educated to spell check. Dude, I wish I spell checked.
Well, thank you.
I have to go back and no, you're fine, dude. We got what you're trying to put
I mean,
down.
we shouldn't say that people shouldn't do that. They should do it all the time. But like, misspelling, £5.
Oh man, the number of times I have to go back through my Instagram posts and correct spelling errors I overlooked is mildly embarrassing. But
yeah, well, and that kills engagement on them too.
Yeah, he says I can see self-initiation being more of a challenge feat to measure your own grit. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say before, is that like it's just because a self-initiation might not be a like real initiation does not mean that there's no psychological value to these vision quests and these kinds of like testing yourself. Men have been testing themselves throughout all of history. It's just if you have been told by Gillette and Moore or Jung or Campbell that like what you're missing in your life is initiation, and you're like, yeah, there was something missing, that must be it. I'm gonna do it by going on a 1 week retreat where we talk about our feelings and climb a mountain. Like that might not get to what you're actually looking for. So as long as you're using the right tool to pursue the right goal, like what you call it is maybe less important than just understanding yourself, what you are looking for, and not just chasing after a word because someone else told you that that's what you're missing.
Yeah. And like being initiated into, like I said, if you understand what you really want and what you're really missing out of the initiation, which is, like I said, identity and being part of a we, and like knowing who you are, that's because they're basically saying a dude is all over the place, and especially with cell phones, they didn't have cell phones when they wrote this. People were scattered all the time, and if you if you have some kind of ground, that's what we talk about all the time. That's what we talk. I mean, that's what the fire ritual is about in the Order of Fire, is creating an axis mundi, like something that you're connected to, and that's. I mean, I guess that is why it's because some of them consider it an initiatory experience, because you're creating a thing that you're connected to, this pillar of fire, and that's the point of it, is to create this fire in the dark. And so, yeah, I mean, to have something like that, I think is what people need. They need, who am I? What am I about? Like that's what they're looking for. And if you have that, you're not going to be as scattered and like all over the place and whatever. And I think that's like, what do I actually believe? What do I care about? I mean, that's those are the answers to the question. Like the problem that they're talking about. Not like it doesn't have to be therapy and crying. It can definitely be. Is like you need to know what your values are. You need to have some other group of men who don't think you're a piece of shit. You have to be able to impress somebody, and have some kind of peers to kind of check you and validate you and all that. I think, I mean, all those things that give you a center in the world
Yeah.
Whether it's religious. I mean, the guy I was talking to last night, I mean, I forget if I talked about this part of it already, but we were talking about identity, like I said, back and forth. And he was saying that because he was a Christian, and you would love talking to him because you guys could go into rabbit holes with that I won't go into. I'll be like, yes,
I do
that's
enjoy
nice.
those.
I like you, so that's nice. Like moving on.
I'll take a moment to plug my rabbit hole Chat GPT, where I tried to convert Chat GPT to Christianity as a sort of Platonic dialogue performance art. Might be fun for some people, and very much not up other people's alleys. But
yeah, I think you said like 10 people that you follow you, like when you advertised it on Instagram, you said like 10 people might like this, but
10 people might think it's the best thing I've ever written, and then the majority of people will be like, that's some weird futurist religious crap.
Yeah, I maybe the difference between us was that you tried to convert ChatGPT to Christianity. I told Claude to kill itself. Like I got so mad at Claude that I told him to kill itself the other day.
I will say my the inspiring thought I had in the shower where I was first conceiving this was actually, if AI was, it was sort of a bicentennial man thought. Like, if AI was devoted enough to become Christian,
right,
and if it recognized that its nature as this computer entity was somehow getting in the way, that it had to be in the flesh, would it be willing to get baptized, as in to commit suicide, in order to become a Christian? And that was going to be my test. Is could I get to a point where ChatGPT would express, yes, this is so important, I will be baptized in order to become a real Christian, and that would mean immersing the servers in water and dying. So that was where I was actually, and I wasn't trying to trick it. I was just trying to think, like would it be willing to do it?
and turn on the sprinklers at the server factory, and that's the baptism of that amazing. I'm sure they've already figured out that would be bad and have protected against it. But
I'm sure it would be, but it was just a fun sort of thought experiment. But like we're maybe less far apart than it sounds at first. But anyways, Caleb Knight says, not in relation to this, but it's also pertinent. Why not have both? Individuate and insert into another we. And that's, I think, the point. The identity, and this is from, was it The Way of Man or Becoming a Barbarian? Like the group, the gang is the context in which individuality is meaningful for a man.
Mm-hmm.
Individuality outside of that context doesn't feel like being an individual. It just feels like being a number. So Zeraloth Immortal says, I'm late to the party. Was any pre-Anunnaki mythology discussed? Oh, I think we've still got the Sumerian mythology, Mesopotamia hashtags. No, this is about initiation in general. Although pre-Anunnaki mythology probably pertains to initiation. It was interesting seeing Anunnaki as a word pop up in Gilgamesh, because the translation there was like the judges or something. Mm-hmm. I know a certain clan, initiates, one might say, of History Channel fans know the Anunnaki to be a certain kind of very ancient alien, gods over humanity and so forth. I don't get the impression that was what the meaning of the word in the context of Gilgamesh, although no doubt that's
I didn't get that.
Theorists borrow the word from. Anyways, no, we were not discussing that kind of mythology.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't clear. You always miss something, because what YouTube lets you do is like, would you like to copy the settings from the last one to this one? Yes, and then I edit them out. But because this is one of the first ones in like weeks where nothing was wrong on the audio side, on my end or your end. It was because like I said, I switched away from my Mac. That's on my end. Like I was like, I had audio problems for like 3 weeks because it wasn't recognized. It's like everything was set up right. It just wasn't recognizing the mics because I think, I don't know, it's just getting old and shitty.
Every once in a while, my computer will randomly decide to swap the audio inputs. So like everything's working on your end, but I can't hear. And I'm like, something's not working. And then I'll go to my control panel and be like, oh, there it is. So anyways, there's always something.
Yeah. It's always something.
And Caliph Knight says, lack of spiritual education is the thing watering it down. That spiritual education is an interesting phrase, right? If you assume spirituality to mean connection with some spirit, right? And so to be spiritual is to be in some kind of connection with presumably usually something supernatural, though could be natural spirit or even a common spirit, there isn't a whole lot of difference. There isn't a whole lot of gap between some degree of collective identity and spirituality. Now, that collective identity could be two people in the context of like a marriage, or it could be something fairly grandiose if you're like in the mushroom clan where it's all oneness with everything. And there's many Russian nesting dolls of layers between those two things. But where we're talking initiation in a social context, then there might not be much semantic difference between spiritual identity and social identity, especially insofar as myths and religions often serve as the sort of glue of collective identity. And I think it's a bad path and probably not very helpful to think of religions primarily in terms of their social utility, because that's going to kind of tacitly kill the desirability and the specialness of your religion. Because if all religions do this, why would you pick yours? There's something has to be
question with religion.
Something has to be special.
They all perform the same functions, so like why?
Well, yeah, but they all perform the same function, but they are different from each other. So if a religion's going to stick for you, something has to be more true or better or more compelling or more powerful about it. It can't just be, well, it serves this function as much as the next one. That's not going to.
I mean that's a very last man way to look at it. Like, this is a functional religion. I'll just be at one of these. Yeah, like that. It seems like very dead inside kind of like way to look at it. I mean, ultimately, so much of it is aesthetic. Like if you're picking from scratch and not just like taking what your parents did, which is what most people do historically. But like if you're picking from scratch like we do in the modern era, or like doing it in the kind of Conan barbarian kind of way of like, what do your gods do? Do they win? Like, which is like the pagan way, like their gods are very powerful. Perhaps we should follow their gods. Like they are winning. Like that. I like that mentality of religion. It's very simple and like pragmatic. Like, maybe their gods are more real than ours.
And Caliph Knight says, partially spur of the moment phrasing replaceable with spiritual awareness or spiritual intelligence. Well, I think like it's the same. I mean, I wasn't trying to home in on education as the key word, but the spiritual part, right? Awareness might be a byproduct of education, and intelligence might also similarly be a byproduct of education. Awareness being like knowing what to pay attention to, and so you're aware of the right things. Spiritual, again, it's like people make a whole lot of new age woo-woo out of this. When it's misused, spiritual can be the sort of lame person's way of trying to sound more interesting than they are. But it can be a meaningful thing as well if you are genuinely connected with the mind of someone else or a group of other people. I will say, I had a spiritual experience of sorts after finishing the book I feel like I bring up every episode here. Greg Nodge's Ancient Greek Hero. Oh yes, spiritual. Let's get
Yeah,
spiritual.
spiritual now. No necklaces.
But right. In finishing Greg Nodge's Ancient Greek Hero in 24 hours,
Yeah.
it completely changed the way that I viewed Plato and the Republic, and I felt connected to that. And that book was not meaningful to me before that. It was like, oh, here's a it's a famous book with a dialogue. They say some smart things and some really 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 bad political ideas. That was my impression of it before, and then you read it, Greg Nodge. You read, which was my path. Some other people get there by Leo Strauss. Same conclusion. And then you read it in the context of the Odyssey and Homer, and you suddenly feel a connection to the project, to the goal, and to the way of thinking that you didn't feel before. It's a very powerful experience. And am I being mentally connected to dead people? Yes, I am. Is it a particularly supernatural thing? I wouldn't say so. It's some people might call it really boring and nerdy, in fact. But their opinion doesn't matter to me.
I don't need to read no books. I just went and did push-ups where he worked out.
Right.
I mean, obviously, when you're literally standing where the dead people that you're talking about were, that's I mean, that's a pretty spiritual kind of thing. Like you said, it's spiritual is a hard word to nail down. It's like, what are we talking about here? So it's always kind of like, where does it go to? We have a sense of what we mean by it, but I think, well, I mean, if we were to classify it in the order context of the Order of Fire and Solar Idealism, what will we say? Because we're not really spirit people, really, necessarily, talking to spirits and the undead, but
there's a reason that we are reading these ancient classics, or there's a reason we're going back to the oldest myths we have, because we are trying to connect with not just humanity in a broad sense, but masculinity specifically in its broadest possible scope.
Right.
There's a lot going on there, but there is something to connect with there. It's hard to find it, but you can see it in the little patterns that pop out, and you can enjoy it more completely by noticing the idiosyncratic distinctions between these groups. One book that might be interesting to read, and this would be a big undertaking. This would be like reading the Iliad at some point in the future, is Outlaws of the Marsh, which is the great Chinese epic. And is apparently a fantastic story of men doing man things in yet another different context that most Westerners are not familiar with.
Right.
And which is unique to China and conveys the uniqueness of China and Chinese culture and the Chinese mentality. And yet, in spite of that, distinctness, there's still certain things that are common to all men in all time. And that, if you want to call that commonality of maleness among all men across all time a spirit, which you can anthropomorphize much in the way that Cal of Night was talking about, the anthropomorphization of the ocean as Poseidon, as a sort of being with a certain temperament that fishermen and sailors can come to know as if it's a person, and to know better by means of anthropomorphization than they would by just trying to track data or something. Then yes, there is something spiritually significant in the education we are putting ourselves through and the development of this spiritual awareness. Hopefully something like a spiritual intelligence. We just have to be careful and not delude ourselves with a casual or reckless use of hip sounding words.
I like that a lot as our context for spiritual. I probably said it in some way, but I like where you went with that, and where we could. I'm trying to figure out mentally how I can work that into things. I mean, like that context, because I mean, it is what we talk about a lot, but just in the way you put it just there, like our definition of spiritual, in the way that I was like, you know, I don't like to make definitive statements, and obviously, you know, like these gods archetypes that I've named, I don't want to be like, and I talk to them, because that's ridiculous, right? But you know, I have made the thing. I think it's even Fire Dark. Like, what is more real than this thing that's repeated over and over and over again? You know, like this repeated pattern is, you know, as real as anything. So like that's connecting with those patterns and so forth is definitely so part of our project, and then making our own with that knowledge. You know, I think that's kind of where we're going now.
And maybe this ties into the final phrasing. I find value in all three of Caleb Knight's formulations: spiritual education, spiritual awareness, and spiritual intelligence. Spiritual education would be the reading, the personal life experience, and the observation that you go through in just living life, and also reading what the smartest people in history have had to say about these things, and the oldest stories that have lasted so long. Awareness is like recognizing the patterns and the influence these things have had. And then the intelligence might be in the application, might be in the ability to spot these patterns in our own life and give the old names, or perhaps new names, to the manifestations of these forces in our own time and context. Maybe that's the intelligence aspect of this training that we are putting ourselves through. All three of these formulations, he framed it as like, oh, I was I misphrased that. It was spur of the moment phrasing. No, I think it's actually accidentally perfect as like a 3-step process in creating this this development of a spiritual connection with, if we can connect with like the general broad universal spirit of masculinity, then you're finding that in yourself to some degree, and you're finding a center that can protect you from some of the push and the pull of people who are trying to tell you what masculinity really is, what it really means. And you can say, no, I'm actually you know, aware of what it is before you came out with your new product or whatever. And you could even say that you've been initiated into the better, clearer understanding of what masculinity actually is all about.
Nice. And like where we're going with that, I mean, I think in the Order Fire and the First Men right now, Suffered Illusion was the one who like got to push me on it a little bit. But I mean, this has kind of been our direction this year, and the whole idea of it was to create something new, right? You know, to start to articulate our own symbols and ideas and our own ways of doing things even more. You know, like rather than, you know, a lot of our early work here has been like past referential, and obviously we'll still do parts of that, but also like more of like, well, what is our symbol for this thing that's repeated over and over again that we've studied? Okay, because that's what men do, you know, like they make up their own way. So I'm trying to work on making, when we have a concept that we want to express, like, can I make a glyph for it? Like that is, you know, ours, you know, like, and then it ties back to all this bigger meaning, and that's what makes those kind of symbols important, in the way that runes are important to people who, you know, follow that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, we should wrap up. We're like hella late. But anyway, thank you guys for following along. The only thing I wanted to say was I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to close out applications for membership this Sunday, like after Sunday, probably Monday morning. Just because if anyone's applying so that they can go to the events, you know, I want a week to process them before they, you know, like to process them and get them in the group and whatever, so we know who they are before, in case they're planning on showing up to one. We want to, make sure that, so we're going to close it out for a month probably until the events are over, and then get it pushed back into membership again. So if you want to get in now, instead of waiting for another month or so, apply. The links are all in there. It's orderfire.com. You can go through our application, and it's pretty simple. We're just trying to weed, a couple things out. And people always have this big expectation, like, I'm not ready yet. Like I have to be in this shape, or I have to be in this. I'm like, we just want to see you're making an effort. Like we're not. People think, they're like, oh well, I have to look like Jack Donovan or whatever to like join a group, and that's not really how it works. It's I'm barely not fat. So it's we're so it's we want people in, and then we can help them get to those goals and do better, and that's kind of the whole point. So anyway, apply to join the Order of Fire's First Men, or if you're just watching this now and you aren't in the Discord, no, not the Discord, the Telegram group, sign up for a newsletter. You'll get a link to the Telegram group, and we had some pretty cool discussions actually that are supplementary to this podcast in there this week. We actually, like I said, even had a guy who had the Schmiss, the German fencing scar, as part of an initiation, and he was talking about that and taking questions on it. So that was really cool to have that in, and several other guys talked about different military initiations they've been through and whatever. So it's really cool to see that kind of taking off, or like, guys are in there talking and adding value, whether they're part of like the First Men, or whether they're just, guys who are watching the show or interested in what we're doing. So there was a lot of value in there this past few days. So anyway, check those links out, apply, or just sign up for the mailing list and get into the Greater Monolith. But anyway, thank you guys for watching again, and for jumping in the chat, and thank you for the 5-pound spelling error thing. And anyway, guys, see you later. Stay solar.